Did you know that you could die from laughing too hard? Or by chewing gum? Or by minding your own business and going about your life only to mysteriously get sucked into the ground? From death at the hands of their favorite sports team to bizarre explosions, these are 6 disturbing ways normal people died. As always, viewer discretion is advised. Let's kick off by going back to the 1970s Britain, a period characterized by political unrest and economic hardship. And also, one of the most bizarre ways to die that I've ever heard of. Alex Mitchell was a 50-year-old bricklayer who, like many during the era, turned to television to find solace and give his mind a break from the turbulent world. On March 24, 1975, he returned to his home in Norfolk, England, following a long day's work, and enjoyed a loving meal prepared for him by his wife, Nessie, before retreating to the couch. On this particular evening, his favorite television sitcom, The Goodies, was airing. This comedy, produced by the BBC, was adored by many throughout the island, and its humor left Brits like Mitchell thoroughly engaged for the entirety of its 30-minute runtime. But unknowingly, at the time, the episode titled Kung Fu Capers would be the last one Mitchell ever watched. The sketch featured a Scotsman draped in tartan, battling a black pudding using nothing more than the traditional instrument of the Highlands, the revered bagpipes. As the Scottish hero sought to defend himself against the so-called martial arts expert, Mitchell could not help but break out in fits of uncontrollable laughter. The bizarre humor kept the bricklayer in a perpetual state of laughter for 25 minutes as the echoes of his enjoyment traveled throughout the house. But little did he or his wife know that his fit of laughter would soon take a drastic turn for the worse. As the show progressed towards the end, Mitchell's laughter only increased until one split moment, his wife recalls. The laughter stopped abruptly. The 50-year-old fell from his chair and started breathing funny before eventually passing out. His worried wife, Nessie, ran to his side, but it was too late as Mitchell died moments after his head hit the ground. What on earth had happened to him? Surely this wasn't somehow death by a funny TV show. A doctor later examined the body of the tradesman in hopes of finding some closure for the family. After carefully analyzing his remains, they determined the excessive laughter Mitchell experienced due to the comedic antics of the show's actors ultimately led him to have a massive heart attack or stroke, resulting in one of the most bizarre deaths in British history. While it may sound outlandish to experience cardiac arrest simply from laughing too much, it would be almost 4 decades before the family would finally get to the mystery surrounding Mitchell's sudden death. 37 years later, in 2012, his granddaughter, Lisa Cork, suffered a cardiac arrest out of nowhere, similar in many ways to the event that led to the death of her grandfather. The doctors were forced to place the 23-year-old into a medically induced coma to increase the chance of saving her life. After meticulous examinations carried out by the doctors, they discovered she suffered from a rare condition known as long QT syndrome. This affects the electrical system of the heart, causing an irregular heartbeat. Those affected by such a condition, which, if left unchecked, can lead to fainting or sudden cardiac arrests. So, the question remains, did Mitchell suffer from LQTS, or did he really die from too much laughter? There's a good chance we will never know, but when you laugh, your heart rate increases. Our next story appears to be taken directly from a horror movie, but we assure you this truly terrifying tale happened in its entirety. In March 2013, Jeff Bush, a 37-year-old man from Sefner, Falira, retreated to his bed for the evening. As he lay asleep in the middle of the night, little did he or his neighbors know that Mother Nature had planned a cruel and unfortunate tragedy that would leave a terrifying scar on his neighborhood, Faithway Drive. As he peacefully slept in his bed like every other night before, undoubtedly, he was awakened like many of the neighbors by a loud crashing noise. This was the sound of the ground caving in from beneath him, and Jeff was sucked into an enormous sinkhole that had opened beneath the floor of his bedroom. Frightened by the startling noise he had just heard coming from Jeff's room, his brother Jeremy rushed to the scene. Uncertain of what he would find when he got to his brother's bedroom, Jeremy quickly flung open the door and was shocked to discover the enormous gaping hole in the center of the floor. In a frenzied panic, Jeremy jumped into the hole, desperately trying to find his brother. While in the pit, he noticed it was still increasing in size. Yet, determined to retrieve his brother, he shrugged all fear aside. The hole continued to pull down dirt, as Jeremy frantically used his hands to dig and search for any sign of his brother. In a truly chilling moment, he could hear the echoes of his brother's voice from deep beneath him, calling for assistance. This motivated Jeremy to work quicker, pulling dirt and debris from beneath his feet, but it was in vain. Unfortunately, once the authorities arrived on the scene, they were forced to pull Jeremy from the hole as the ground continued to collapse, placing him in extreme danger. The entirety of the horrifying event unfolded in seconds, showcasing the devastating nature of the whole ordeal. As for Jeff, who was buried deep underground, there was, unfortunately, nothing the authorities could do to save his life. In the days that followed, Jeff was announced dead. Tragedy had struck this small community, with many still in disbelief that such a thing could happen. Many remained fearful that a gaping hole could open beneath their home in the middle of the night, just like Jeff. Anxiety spread throughout the neighborhood in the weeks and months that followed. Eventually, Jeff's home was demolished. The enormous hole was filled with gravel in hopes that it would seal it off so no one else would suffer a fate similar to the 37-year-old. Jeremy's hardship was far from over, however. Despite the fact they never received his brother's body, he thought he could move on in time. But the events of this dreadful experience would come back to haunt him on more than one occasion. He and the rest of the community of Faithway Drive were forced to relieve a nightmare when, out of nowhere, the hole reopened on August 19, 2015. This surprised experts, who pointed out that it was extremely rare to see a phenomenon occur in precisely the same spot. They proposed the underlying rock structure that caused the initial collapse remained weakened and susceptible to further dissolution by water and other elements. Officials immediately got to work refilling the hole, and luckily, this time around, no one was injured. Back in 2023, the wounds of Jeremy's heart were once again slashed open when the hole reappeared for the third time. Fear quickly spread throughout the community as memories of the tragedy were plunged back into the forefront of their minds. Officials promptly got the situation under control once again. Still, the recurrence of the gaping hole served as a stark reminder of the unpredictability of geological disasters in places like Florida. As for Jeremy, the heartbroken brother claimed he will likely never find closure. As we continue on our journey from bad to worse, our next stop is South America, where we find the devoted Catholic priest, Adeler Antonio de Carli. Having been ordained in 2003, Father Carli seemed to have found his calling after being appointed as the head of the Paróquia de São Cristóvão, a parish in Paranaguá, Brazil. He went on to found the Pastoral Rodoviária, which served as a rest area for truckers, where he would attempt to preach the Gospels to any and all who passed through the bustling port of Paranaguá. After several years, Carli planned to help promote and raise funds for the pastoral, deciding that he would take on a daring adventure and attempt to break the 19-hour flight record for cluster ballooning. His daring plan quickly earned the media's attention, and soon he began preparing for his daring journey across the sky. 6 months before the set date, Carli enrolled in several paragliding courses. However, after only participating in the practical side and refusing to attend theory classes, he was eventually expelled from the school after several run-ins with his teachers. Nonetheless, he felt equipped to complete the challenge, and on January 13, 2008, he set off on his first flight. Father Carli managed to navigate the skies for a total of 4 hours, traveling from Ampere in Paraná, Brazil, to San Antonio in Misiones, Argentina. He used a total of 600 balloons, rising to an impressive height of 17,400 feet and covered a remarkable distance of 16 miles. But to break the world record, he would have to take on a much more significant challenge and remain in the air for an additional 16 hours. Over the next few months, Carli attempted to in as much training as he could, taking mountain climbing and survival courses in preparation for his next flight. On the morning of April 20th, 2008, the priest attended Mass, where he was met with a large service, including members of the media, as this was the day in which he would attempt to break the cluster ballooning record. Despite poor weather, once service had finished, Carly decided to ignore the warnings of experts and went ahead with his bold adventure, strapping himself into a chair attached to around 1,000 balloons. He planned to travel from Paranagua and reach Dorados in Mato Grosso do Sul, where his brother Marcos lived over 20 hours later. Many joined in a crowd to watch the priest take off. While some were certain he was up to the task at hand, others voiced serious concerns centered on his lack of survival and navigational training. Despite this, he put on a brave face and set off into the air with few supplies, including a GPS device, a satellite phone, and minimal survival gear, including a parachute, helmet, and waterproof coveralls. Almost immediately, things began to go wrong for the priest. He rose to a height of around 19,000 feet, which is almost twice as high as he initially expected to reach. 20 minutes into his daring expedition, his lack of experience began to show, as he is quoted as having said, "I need to get in touch with the staff so they can teach me how to operate this GPS here to give the latitude and longitude coordinates, which is the only way anyone on the ground can know where I am. The satellite cell phone keeps going out of range, and furthermore, the battery is getting low." Shortly before 9 p.m. that evening, Carly contacted the Paranagua Port Authority for the last time. In this call, the stressed priest asked them to pass on his location to the Brazilian Navy, and his chilling last words were, "Mayday, Mayday." A manhunt quickly ensued as the Navy, the Brazilian Air Force, and firefighters started searching across the extensive Santa Catarina coast, making use of a small plane rented by Carly's family. But it was useless, as the priest had vanished amidst the dark skies and turbulent waves. The ocean search was later called on April 29th, with experts revealing the chances of finding the priest alive were slim to none. Small pieces of balloon were found floating off the coast, yet no signs of Carl's remain washed up ashore. Several months passed before any new information arose, and unfortunately for his family, the worst-case scenario would soon come true. On July 4th, workers from an offshore oil rig support vessel were horrified when they stumbled upon the lower half of a human body floating in the water around 60 miles from Macaya. Despite being 700 miles from Carly's original starting point, the clothing of the deceased individual appeared strikingly similar to that of the priest, and many were quick to suggest this was, in fact, his remains. DNA testing later confirmed this theory, marking a bleak ending to his ambitious yet fatal story. The upper half of his body was never discovered, leading to various theories about his ultimate demise. Did sharks viciously rip him apart, or did some other unfortunate event befall the respected priest? Maybe we will never know. Nonetheless, despite being motivated by good intentions, the priest's unfortunate demise serves as a stark reminder of the potential dangers associated with undertaking such a daring adventure. His death will continue to serve as a cautionary tale for those who seek to take on daring stunts without adequate safety measures and training. As we move on to our next disturbing death, I'm sure you can agree that at any moment, an unforeseen tragedy can occur, often in ways we cannot even fathom. This was precisely the case for Britney Nicole Cecil, a hockey fan. On March 16, 2002, the 13-year-old was happily in attendance at the Nationwide Arena in Ohio to watch her beloved Columbus Blue Jackets take on the Calgary Flames. She had received the tickets as an early birthday present from her parents. Unbeknown to anyone in the arena then, tragedy would soon strike with as little as 12 minutes left in the game. In the second period of the match, a powerful shot by the Blue Jackets' Espen Knutsen was deflected by the Flames' Derek Morris, and the puck went hurtling beyond the boundary of the glass behind the net, whizzing into the crowd. The durable and hard vulcanized rubber puck collided with the side of Britney's face, smashing into her temple at unprecedented speed. At first glance, it appeared to be nothing more than a minor injury, and as none of the hockey players even noticed the puck had hit a young girl in the stands, the game continued as normal. Britney's parents were worried about the well-being of their child following the incident and took the young girl to the first aid station. Upon a quick inspection, Medical professionals surmised she may have suffered from a skull fracture, so they decided to admit her to the hospital. Britney then traveled to Columbus Children's Hospital in an ambulance operated by the Columbus Division of Fire, with her only visible injury being a gash on her forehead. As she was able to walk and talk, medical professionals believed there were no signs of any serious problems. Yet things then took a turn for the worse. The young girl suffered a terrifying seizure, and doctors were left with no choice but to admit her to the hospital in hopes of discerning whether or not she had sustained severe damage to her head. In the 24 hours that followed, Britney appeared to make a recovery, communicating with doctors and dismissing any signs of dizziness or pain. However, it was only after a CT scan that the true nature of the injury was discovered, as following the lengthy examination, it was discovered the young sports fan had suffered a torn vertebral artery, resulting in severe clotting and swelling of the brain. Nearly 2 days after the initial incident on March 18th, she developed a higher fever and lost consciousness. Doctors did all they could to save her life, but their efforts were in vain. At 5:15 p.m., 2 days before her 14th birthday, doctors were forced to announce that Britney had passed away from her injuries. The devastating news rocked the hockey and wider sports community, with heartfelt condolences pouring in for the family. A commemoration of the young girl's life led to a moment of silence for Britney at the next Blue Jackets home game, played against the Detroit Red Wings. The team's players wore her initials, BNC, on their helmets for the remainder of the season. Despite being the first fatality in the long 85-year history of the league, the NHL decided to issue a mandate in hopes of ensuring an incident of this caliber never happened again. They announced all rinks would see the installation of safety nets to prevent pucks from flying into the crowd. The tragedy associated with Britney's death ushered in a new age for NHL fans, one that placed further attention on the safety of spectators. Britney's untimely passing serves as a cruel reminder of the unforeseen dangers that can occur at a moment's notice. As we continue on this chilling journey, you might be asking yourself, can the deaths really become any more disturbing? Well, we need only point you in the direction of Ukraine, where we find the harrowing account of Vladimir Leonos. Once, a promising 25-year-old chemistry student was met with an abrupt end after a terrifying accident that occurred on December 9, 2009. Leonos was a bright mind and worked hard to earn a spot at Kiev's revered Polytechnic Institute. Determined to become a respected member in his field, the student seldom took time off and often worked on projects at the weekend in the comfort of his home. On this fateful evening, he spent Saturday night, like many prior, sitting alone in his room, thoroughly engaged in his studies and chewing a lot of gum. But unlike most people, Leonos had one unusual habit that thoroughly enhanced the flavor of his favorite chewing gum. He would dip it in powdered citric acid, giving it a unique sour taste. On this fateful evening, his simple habit would unfortunately lead to a terrifying mistake that would cost the young scientist his life. As Leonos studied away in his room during the evening, his family was quietly gathered downstairs, going about the remainder of the day in their own manner. All of a sudden, his mother was met with fright as a loud explosion echoed outwards from her son's room. Overcome with anxiety, the aging woman ran to her son's assistance, hoping it was merely a science experiment gone wrong. As she approached the handle of the door, there was no way she could have imagined the scene she would be forced to experience. Once the door was pushed open, she was met with the terrifying sight of her young son's blood-splattered room and his lifeless body. The explosion had been so powerful that a large piece of Leonos' jaw was missing, and his face was covered in blood. She immediately called emergency services, who rushed to the scene. But by the time they got there, the young scientist had already been long deceased. His family and friends were left heartbroken by the incident, with many questioning how such a devastating explosion could occur within the confines of Leonos' room. Investigators quickly got to work in hopes of ensuring no foul play occurred. As they meticulously examined the remains of the unfortunate student in his room, they took several samples from various items in the room, including his beloved chewing gum. In the weeks that followed, the forensic crew was shocked to discover the chewing gum was laced with an unusual substance, which was quite likely an explosive. The forensic team surmised it might have been the chemical penterythritol tetranitrate, or PETN. Typically used as a highly volatile explosive in military-grade applications, even a small amount of PETN can cause devastating blasts. Leonos had access to this potent explosive chemical in the university lab, but the question remains, how did it end up on his chewing gum? As the investigators weighed up all of their options, they proposed a theory that suggested a fatal mistake led to the premature death of Leonos. In their report, the team claimed the young student likely mistakenly dipped his chewing gum in the extremely dangerous PETN instead of the citric acid that generally sat on his desk. Both substances would have looked fairly similar in their powdered form, and unfortunately, this one simple mistake would have dire consequences for the aspiring scientist. As Leonos unknowingly chewed on his gum that fateful evening, the pressure of his teeth grinding against the petin-infused gum likely set off the powerful blast, destroying his jaw and face and killing him instantly. Heartfelt condolences rolled in for Leonos in the weeks that followed his shocking death. If you aren't already shocked, I'm certain this next story will leave you horrified. Our story begins over with Brian Wells, a middle-aged pizza delivery driver based in the city of Erie. On August 28, 2003, Wells found himself at the center of one of the most notable bank robberies in the history of the United States. At 2:30 p.m., he arrived at PNC Bank at Summit Town Center on Peach Street and gave the teller an affixed note demanding $250,000 in cash. What distinguished this robbery from others was the disturbing bomb strapped to a collar on his neck. Appearing as a victim during the robbery, Wells told the teller that if he didn't get the money in 15 minutes, the bomb would be set off. Alongside the explosive, he was given a shotgun disguised as a cane with strict instructions to use it should they refuse to give him the cash. Despite understanding the severity of the scenario, the tellers couldn't access the vault that quickly, and Wells was forced to leave the bank with a mere $8,700, a fraction of what the perpetrators demanded. By 2:38, the police had received a 911 call from a witness who reported a male leaving the bank with a bomb or something wrapped around his neck. This was the first known emergency call for the incident. Shortly after this call, Wells was by the police outside the bank. He quickly began pleading with officers that he was taken hostage, and if he didn't comply with the instructions given to him by the perpetrators of this elaborate scheme, the explosive would be. Untrained in the art of defusing bombs, the responding police officers could do nothing to disarm the elaborate homemade device, and instead focused on clearing pedestrians from the surrounding area. The supervisor at the scene called for assistance from the bomb squad at 3:04 p.m., almost 30 minutes after the 911 call was first made. Tensions were running high at the scene due to the bizarre nature of the circumstances surrounding the crime. This escalated suddenly when at around 3:18, the device on Wells's neck exploded. The aftermath of the explosion left Wells with a fist-sized hole in his chest, killing him instantly in a gruesome public display. This unique and terrifying case had just turned from a robbery to homicide, and detectives were determined they would get to the bottom of it. As the investigation was conducted, it became apparent the whole incident was part of an elaborate scheme orchestrated by several figures, including Marjorie Deal Armstrong. With a history of mental illness and strong criminal aspirations, Marjorie is thought to have been the mastermind of the sadistic plan aimed at robbing a bank in hopes of using the procured funds to carry out an assassination attempt on her father. Marjorie's father was an extremely wealthy man, and she planned the devious scheme, hoping that with his death, she would inherit his vast fortune. However, it appears she and her co-conspirators had failed at the first hurdle, and now they would be charged with the murder of Wells. One unanswered question surrounding this bizarre and heartbreaking tale is centered on the involvement of Wells himself. Some have proposed he was in on the scheme from the beginning and was supposed to be wearing a fake explosive device the day he walked into the bank. This would suggest Marjorie's plan changed, and she decided to tie up loose ends in an attempt to protect her from future investigations. However, in 2018, a woman named Jessica Hoopsick came forward and admitted to her involvement in the plot. She claims Wells was set up being offered money and substances in exchange for taking part in the robbery. Whatever the true story, the events that unfolded that day in Erie continue to echo through the ages as one of the most disturbing deaths to ever occur in the United States. The horrifying details of the crime garnered attention from around the world when the Netflix docuseries Evil Genius aired in 2018. It delved into the lives of the conspirators in the lead-up to that fateful day, their motives, and the moral ambiguity surrounding Wells' involvement. The individuals in this video, unfortunately, fell victim to seriously disturbing and, in some cases, bizarre deaths during events that many of us experience in our everyday lives. It serves as a chilling reminder that fate is not predetermined, and while we all have plans for tomorrow, it is never truly guaranteed. Want to support the channel? Join for exclusive perks. Thanks for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Stay bold and live brave.